You're watching the second episode of BigFatAstroVlog. I'm Patrick Watson, I'm an astrologer, and, oh my god, my desk is in space! It's in space! Space! What's new in my ass, Dro? We are both sick of hearing about what happened at the Oscars, so I won't even bother. However, one sort of cool thing about the Oscars is the planetary signature which describes them. The first Academy Awards ceremony was held on May 16th, 1929. You'll notice there was a pretty sweet Sun-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus that day, and of course Jupiter is honors and awards. That Sun-Jupiter conjunction is square Neptune in showbiz Leo, so naturally the awards are connected with achievements in cinema. So we got an annual gold statue dispensing ritual of scarlet carpets, glamour and glitz, emotional speeches and political digs, the human condition, awards that are rigged, Botoxed faces and plastic tits. So don't call them Oscars, call them Sun, Jupiter, Square, Neptunes. Rolls right off the tongue. And now, for a hot piece of astro. Glorified taxi service Uber was once the darling of Silicon Valley. Now it's looking more like the screw-up of the tech family. Uber has been having a rough 2017 so far. In the wake of Trump's defeated Muslim visa ban, Uber was accused of encouraging protests at airports for more business, while also accused of colluding with Trump through the CEO's presence on a presidential advisory board. Uber lost 200,000 customers that weekend due to the social media campaign #DeleteUber, which started on January 28, 2017. After days of controversy, Uber CEO Travis Kalanick stepped down from Trump's advisory board on February 2, 2017. On February 19th, a blog post from a former employee of Uber went viral. It detailed a harrowing episode of sexual harassment from her manager and gender bias at the company, painting the picture of an ugly, cutthroat company culture. Less than 10 days later, an Uber driver recorded a video of a heated argument he got into with his passenger. And his passenger was Uber CEO Travis Kalanick. So, what's going on here? Uber was started on March 1st, 2009. The sun was at 11 Pisces, and through the month of January and February 2017, that's exactly where Neptune was. Neptune in Uber's chart is generally conjunct Mars and Mercury, so Neptune's transit to Uber's sun is bringing forth all this Mercury and Mars type stuff, like bad press, protests, angry employees, lost customers, etc. Neptune also tends to dissolve what it touches, so this isn't necessarily a good thing for a company, or at least for its leaders. Additionally, the lunar eclipse in mid-February was at 22 Leo, opposed to Uber's Mars and Neptune. But the other interesting thing here is that Uber was started just a few days before Venus stationed retrograde in Aries. Venus goes retrograde in the same part of the zodiac every 8 years, so Uber has just recently experienced its first Venus synodic return. I think a few things will happen in this ongoing Venus retrograde period, given everything that is currently happening with this company. Perhaps justice will be pursued for the former employee who suffered sexual harassment at Uber, or other allegations might come to light about the treatment of women in this company. There'll probably be an attempt to rescue the company's image and improve their relations with the public. Venus does try to make things right, after all. Will it succeed? Yeah, I don't really know. I will say it's looking a little more like Unter rather than Uber. Still, a pretty hot piece of astro. Something smells. Smells like ass. Tro. We're in Lent, the time of year when Christians post selfies of old men giving them an oily Simba to get a second chance at their failed New Year's resolution. They give up their habits lest they grab it before an Easter rabbit delivers their eggs, dagnabbit. Of course, the 40 days of Lent is fairly close to the length of a Venus retrograde, and just like Jesus was tempted by Satan in the desert, so can people be susceptible to Venus retrograde's temptations. It's interesting then that this year's Venus retrograde actually lines up pretty closely with Lent, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it's probably going to be a bit harder this year to keep your hands out of your pants. Lent is every year, which makes me think of the sun because it's in the same part of the zodiac every year. The sun is in Pisces most of the time during Lent. I say most of the time because the date of Easter varies year to year. Easter is considered to be the first Sunday after the first full moon after the sun's vernal equinox, which is totally not astrological at all, Catholic Church. And suddenly I realized the season of Lent is pretty Piscean, especially when compared to what happens when the sun is in that other Jupiter-ruled sign, Sagittarius. The sun enters Sagittarius right around Thanksgiving, which basically inaugurates the run-up to Christmas, Advent. True to the reputation of Jupiter and Sagittarius, everyone overeats and overspends in the season of peace on earth and goodwill to all men. And just like Jupiter, the mascot of the season is a gift-dispensing jolly red giant. It's telling then that when the sun is in Pisces during Lent each year, people do the exact opposite of overdoing it, at least after Mardi Gras. Instead, they sacrifice an indulgence for some greater spiritual gain. Lent is a contemplative, reflective, prayerful time where you desperately focus on not touching yourself. So we can see how even though Jupiter rules both Sagittarius and Pisces, they have a kind of qualitative difference. Sagittarius is the diurnal Jupiter sign, and it's about stuffing your face. Pisces is the nocturnal Jupiter sign, and it's about stuffing your soul. Both are mutable signs revving up to a major holiday at the solstice or equinox. Sagittarius is Advent leading up to Christmas. Pisces is Lent leading up to Easter. What are you going to give up for Lent, Patrick? You're surely not asking. As it happens, I'm going to give up mass genocide. So far, I'm doing pretty well. I'm going to be honest about something. I kind of hate using Twitter. I'm not very good at condensing what I have to say into 140 characters. People who can use it and still see something worth saying are worth following. And for that reason, you should follow Sam Reynolds. He can issue quite the takedown, I must say. He recently had a conversation on Twitter about the modern significations of the nodes. And I realized that this is another thing that is a real pain in my ass to roll. What are the nodes? The lunar nodes are simply where the paths of the sun and the moon meet. If a new moon takes place within 17 degrees of a node, there's a solar eclipse. If it's a full moon, there's a lunar eclipse. The north node is where the moon's path rises above the sun's, and the south node is where the moon falls below. So naturally, the nodes are all about karma and reincarnation. What? Yeah, for some reason, the south node is about your past life, and the north node is about your future life. Here are my problems with this assertion, and you're free to disagree. Number one, all of the problems with reincarnation in general. For example, what if it's your first life? What would the south node represent if you hadn't had a previous life yet? 2, how does the past life / future life schema apply towards the transiting nodes? The present moment has a past life? Did this moment also used to be Cleopatra? 3, if your next life is represented by the north node in Aries, for example, then wouldn't that mean your next life would have to start when the south node was in Aries? But then wouldn't that mean the life after that would have to have the north node in Aries? And then the next life would have to have the south node in Aries? And so on, and so on, and so on. For at least 9 years and multiples of 18 after that, after you die. Worst merry-go-round ever. 4, how do you even know if you're right in your interpretation? I mean, verifiability isn't necessarily the end-all be-all of all useful knowledge, but it, counts for something. Nodes as past and future lives just seems like a complicating and unnecessary add-on, given what the astrological tradition tells us about the nodes. One take is that they're to be treated with caution. For example, Vedic Valens suggests to never elect a chart that has a moon in the quadruplicities of the nodes. He also calls annual perfections that come out to the signs of the natal nodes climacteric periods. I'm probably not saying that right. Climacteric. They took my joke. Serapio says that casting election charts around eclipses or when the sun is in the sign of a node produces permanence. So I wouldn't recommend casting an electional chart for your boner this month. Other traditions say the north node is about increasing and the south node is about decreasing, or the north node is about entering the world and the south node is about exiting the world. And this sounds abstract, but we are talking about abstract points in space here. They are the intersections between the sun and the moon, where eclipses happen. And eclipses have been associated with the rise and fall of nations and kings since the Babylonians got bored and stayed up late one night. The nodes are definitely some sort of collective axis, something between individuals and groups, families and generations, etc. But to be a signifier of your personal past and future lives is some next level conceit. It takes longer for the nodes to go around the zodiac than Jupiter does. The first person to to come up with this idea clearly must have had their North Node conjunct something in my chart, because their next life was clearly about being a pain in my astro. Here are 2 things you should do, which are right up your astro if you're watching this video. Number 1, subscribe to my dang YouTube channel, BigFatAstroVlog. 2, if you want to get my articles and videos 1 day early, consider supporting my poor ass on Patreon with as little as 1 measly $1. Seriously. Cough up a buck, you cheap bastard! Why don't you cough up a buck, you cheap bastard? 3, feel free to share and comment on my articles and videos on social media. Who knows, I might even drop in myself. Thanks for watching. I'm Patrick Watson. And oh my god, I'm still sitting at a desk in the void of space! Space!